So, headphone series, right? So, for those of you that don't know this, this idea really came about during a faculty meeting when we were trying to figure out what to do, basically in lieu of concerts. So the format of this that we ended up uh, coming upon was that we're gonna, we thought it'd be neat to have like a concert-like experience in which, but we're not actually performing. We're just presenting works and recordings and performances that we thought were particularly cool. So, as you know by now, there are going to be 8 of these presentations as part of the headphone series, and they'll be very wide ranging and should be pretty fun. Um, Hopefully, you saw in the description that tonight's. So I'm gonna be presenting on BIPOC composers, and that's something that I've tried to make sure I learned about more in over the summer and with the events that have happened recently. So I'm excited to present on it. And I hope the works that we listen to are going to be pretty interesting. I think they're interesting at least. Um, I want to make sure I hit a whole bunch of points here, so forgive me if I uh, scroll through here for a second. So the point of the series, as I said, is to replicate in some way the experience of going to a concert. Along the way, we want to make sure that we are, as music majors and as music lovers, having the opportunity to listen to high quality music, and come to some sort of judgments and understandings of what these pieces of music mean. And then when we were talking through this idea, this idea that we kind of brainstormed was, having that experience of talking about music, right? Even if it's extremely informal. When you all went to concerts, department concerts in the past, these were, you go with your friends, you sit in the concert hall, you listen to some ensemble perform something, or a guest artist perform something, and then whether it's, like I say, whether it's formal or informal, you talk about it, right? You talk about it with your friends. You say, "Wow, that piece was kind of cool." Like I really liked what they did there, and even those spur of the moment conversations, we really think they're important, and so that's what these headphone series sessions are meant to foster. So we're going to listen to things. We're going to ideally, listen closely, interpret these things, talk about what they mean historically, but then afterwards, the idea is be prepared to to come to your own judgments, be moved by anything, but ideally afterwards, please feel free and feel welcomed to share your ideas about these works. We'd really like to foster some kind of like actual discussion about these. We can debate, we can disagree if we want, of course, respectfully, but come to some kind of common ground and have that social, intellectual experience that is, we think, really critical to to being a music major. Okay, so as I mentioned, tonight I'm presenting on BIPOC composers in choral music. If we don't know that term, I know most of you do, but we're talking about people who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color. And as the choral director here, uh, this topic is really important to my field, and with the protests this past summer, this idea of bringing out works from composers of color has really taken hold and has become, like I said, really really important in my field. Um, Additionally, with everything that happened this summer, I really felt it was important for me to get to know um, the contributions in the field a little bit better. I came to realize that um, that my training was extremely Eurocentric, and I realized that after some reflection, I really needed to make sure that I reinforced my knowledge on these things, and I ended up doing quite a bit of research while I was planning repertoire for this fall that the choirs could perform, and I just came across so many fantastic works. A lot of which the choirs couldn't perform because we're in a virtual semester, and this piece calls for large orchestra, or this piece is written for this ensemble, and certain things just didn't fit. But I found all these really, really neat pieces that I thought should be better known. So that leads us to tonight. I really wanted to, with the headphone series idea coming about, I figured this is the perfect opportunity to share some of those pieces. I won't be sharing any of the works that the choirs are currently working on, because you could come to the concert on December 3rd, the virtual concert, and yes, that's a shameless plug. But yeah, there's nothing that's being prepared, or even by the same composer. So these are unique composers from what those choirs are studying, and we'll hopefully bring some new things to light, and that's the idea. Okay, two disclaimers that I feel like I have to say. Number one is that I come into this conversation knowing that as a white male, I still have a lot to learn about this subject, composers of color, but also about racial injustice as a whole. I recognize that my experience in this field and life to this point has been shaped by privilege. I understand and acknowledge that inequality exists, both in classical music and across our society. Racism is systemic in our culture, and this is like one tiny little part. This and the programming that the choirs are doing this semester is one tiny little way of being a part of change, I think. And so it's within that framework that I come into this. The works that I'm presenting on here are all by marginalized composers, and I think they've been marginalized by this Eurocentric bias in classical and art music, and I think these works deserve our attention. However, and this is the disclaimer part, nothing I say in here is meant to legitimize intolerance or further stereotypes. Nor is anything intended as a political statement. I personally view these issues as human rights issues, and so it's really apolitical for me, at least. And I just say that to say that I hope nothing that I say, either advertently or inadvertently, is taken in a negative way. But of course, if it is, if I've said something that came across a certain way, then I'm of course always willing to have a conversation about it, because I think it's through those conversations that we improve and progress. Anyway, the second disclaimer is that this is only a tiny sampling of the works that I've come across this summer. There's no way of fitting everything into an hour-long lecture, so even just making this presentation making it representative was difficult to do. So I encourage, before we even begin, I encourage everybody to go out and dig in the repertoire yourselves as much as you can. Challenge yourself to try to find works like this, because they are they're out there. They've just been hidden by, like I said, hundreds of years of bias, I think. Anyway, so considering that, the way we're going to move tonight is I'd like to move chronologically. They're kind of in groups of twos. And actually, let me share a link with you, because these are all of the, oops, that's not what I meant to do. Copy and paste. This is everything that I'm going to share with you tonight. Sorry, I'm just letting somebody into the waiting room while I'm doing that. So here's a Google Doc that has, like I said, all the links of YouTube videos and scores and some other just pertinent information on the things that we'll talk about tonight. So when you look at that, you'll see, if you look at that, you'll see there's 6 works. Some are longer than others. The first 2 are historical, like older works, if you will. The first is Jose Mauricio Nunes Garcia, who's a Brazilian composer of the late 1700s and early 1800s. And then Nathaniel Dett was an early 20th century composer. But then we move forward into two works of like the mid to late 1900s, and that is the Ariel Ramirez Missa Criolla and Marcus Light Tres Cantos, which is, those are really two really neat works. And then the last two are brand new. A recording by the Aeolians, and closing with probably the largest work of the night, which is Joel Thompson's Seven Last Words of the Unarmed, which I want to listen to that whole thing because it's just remarkable. So, without further ado, let's kind of break into Jose Mauricio. The idea here is I want to just tell you about the pieces very briefly and then play them, right? And then hopefully, as they're playing, you have some kind of a framework, and we can have a short discussion about either in pairs or we'll see how things go. But so just to introduce Nunes Garcia, as I just mentioned, Brazilian composer that was active just prior to and during Brazil's move to independence from Portugal, of course. He was very active in Rio de Janeiro, and when the Portuguese king moved his court to Rio de Janeiro, Nunes Garcia became the court the director of music in the royal chapel. Okay, which was really interesting because Nunes Garcia was at least he was mixed race. He's usually listed as being mixed race. We know that at least his mother was of African descent and was the child of slaves. His father, they're not totally sure about, but we know that he had a dark skin appearance, and that comes up in the written record a lot because he ran into racial injustice throughout his career. Like when the prince, later king, came to Rio de Janeiro. He brought a whole bunch of musicians from Portugal with him, and these musicians, there are all kinds of accounts of these musicians not wanting to play for him because he was dark skinned, and they refer to him as mulatto. Of course, we don't use that term anymore, but that's many accounts of racism against him. But despite that, he was this fantastic musician, and he's a composer, organist, and very highly regarded during his day. So the piece we're going to listen to is his Requiem. It was written in 1816. It was written in response to the death of the Queen of Portugal. But what's interesting is that his mother, Nunes Garcia's own mother, passed within days of the Queen passing also. So it's considered one of his greatest works because it has this ultra emotional character to it. As you may hear, there are a number of similarities to the Mozart Requiem. We know that he knew the Mozart Requiem, and he actually conducted the Brazilian premiere of the Mozart Requiem in 1819. So, neat little piece of history here. Kind of tucked in amongst a bunch of things. So I'm going to play this for you, and I can show you the score as well. Not this right here, the Missa dos Defuntos, but we refer to it as his Requiem. It is here. I want to play just the beginning of the Kyrie for those of us that have sung or sang the Mozart Requiem a few years ago. Here, check this out. So for those of us that know that work, and you can still hear me, right? Now that I have my headphones in? Okay. The For those of us that know the Mozart Requiem, Kyrie eleison, very, very similar arc to that fugal idea. That's one of the more strong similarities, I think, between this work and that one. Anyway, rather than go from to discuss each piece in a row, I'm thinking maybe can we listen to two and then discuss either or both at the same time? So I'd like to skip ahead to what the next one. This is the Nathaniel Dett. Listen to the Lambs, okay? And you'll see the score for that in just a minute also. But let me get my notes here. A couple quick pieces of housekeeping that I forgot to mention. Number one, here is for those of you looking to get recital credit, here is a Google form for you to fill out, please. I just put that in the chat, okay? The other thing that I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, related to the title of this whole thing, put on a good pair of headphones if you're not already. I see most of you are, but for those of you that I can't see, do put on a good pair of headphones or maybe play it through good speakers or something like that, because each one of these recordings, they're pretty good. So send the link again. Oh, that's because I went to everyone in the waiting room. How helpful is that? Okay. Everyone in meeting. How about that? Here you go. Sorry. Okay. There we go. So next is, so like I say, after this one, then we'll maybe discuss two at a time. But this is Nathaniel Dett. The next one, the next composer I'd like to bring forward would be Nathaniel Dett. It's a work called Listen to the Lambs. Nathaniel Dett's this really interesting character who he's a black composer, and he was born in Canada, moved to the U.S. when he was 11. He was a pianist, an organist, conductor of orchestras and choirs. He led a bunch of choirs throughout his life. This remarkably successful career despite encountering racism throughout his entire career. And he was rather outspoken about it. He didn't shy away from it at all, which is commendable. But he attended Harvard and Eastman. He taught at universities around the U.S. He performed at Boston's Symphony Hall, Carnegie Hall, many others. It's a really successful career. He was well known for incorporating African American spirituals into the classical idiom. That's something that would become a trend in the 30s and 40s, but he was doing it in the teens, 20s, and 30s. So he was ahead of the curve that way, and he spoke really, really beautifully about spirituals and what they mean. There's a quote here that I found of his. He says, "We have this wonderful store of folk music, the melodies of an enslaved people who pour out their longings, their griefs, and their inspirations in one great universal language. But this store will be of no value unless we utilize it, unless we treat it in such a manner that it can be presented in choral form, or in lyric or in operatic works, in concertos and suites and salon music. Unless our musical architects take the rough timber of Negro themes and fashion from it music which will prove that we, too, have national feelings and characteristics, as have the European peoples whose forms we have zealously followed for so long." Right? So he's he feels very passionate that that spirituals in particular and African American folk songs have real value as artistic works. And so for that reason, he incorporates them into countless works, works for orchestra and chamber music. You know, he's putting spirituals in all over the place, which is great. This work, it's an arrangement of an old spiritual. Listen to the Lambs is an old spiritual that dates back into some hymnals from like the early 1907. I think I saw one publication. But he takes this work in a completely new direction. It almost doesn't even qualify as a spiritual arrangement. It's really kind of its own standalone composition with the way he treats it. So, interestingly, also this performance is by the chamber choir of Howard University, and that's of course a historically black college in Washington D.C. So here, check out this. Listen to the Lambs. Get it back to the beginning. All right. I had never heard that piece before, uh, and I just thought that was so cool. When when I first heard it, I was like, "Why don't I know this piece?" Like I've been studying choral music for years and years, and I've never come across it. Right. So about either the Debt or the Nunez Garcia, you have any reactions? Anything you're thinking that anything that comes to mind about either of these pieces? That's an open question to anybody.
I had one thought.
Okay.
It's so good. Why don't we ever hear this stuff more? It's so good.
Exactly. That's exactly. Yeah, I know.
Really like that. I mean, I like both pieces, but I really like that. Listen to the Lambs piece. It's really neat. It's got some really cool harmony, and um, it's got. It almost feels like a mix of two kind of different styles. It's got that little like soulful feel to it, but it's also got this. This is gonna sound really funny, but it reminds me a little bit of the like in Bambi, like the music, the vocal sounds of that time, like so it was just kind of an interesting little merge. Maybe I'm just
Yeah,
a little tired, but
it's like there's like an austerity to it. Like for any, at least the way I hear it is that you hear like a spiritual arrangement. You know, like if anybody that's sung any like William Dawson or Jester Hairston, those old style spirituals, you know, ain't got time to die or something like that. You know, those classic. You know, they're a lot of fun. It kind of has that flavor to it, but then at the same time, it's like wait, there's something different going on here compositionally. It's like there's a lot of really interesting thought put into that. That whole middle section, he shall feed his flock like a shepherd. That's not the spiritual. That's just freely composed, right? So it's like I don't know. I found that piece to be just really striking. Anybody think anything about the Nunez Garcia?
I thought that more than just the Kyrie section, like it had Mozart vibes. As
Yeah.
soon as it began, I was like the Requiem section, almost exactly like rhythmically, like the very first Requiem sounded very similar.
Yep. The slow four. Yeah.
And it made me think like, what's the like? How do I phrase it? Like you can be inspired by something, but then what's the the too much likeness? Like, where does that? I don't
Yep.
know how to phrase that. Yeah.
That's a very good point. And you know, and yeah, and where does it become imitation?
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to flattery or something like that, right? But like well, the one thing I would say to that is that there were a lot of composers that did that.
Right.
Michael Haydn, Michael Haydn had a requiem. This is Joseph Haydn's brother, who was also a very successful composer. He had one. He had a requiem that was like a crazy carbon copy, like almost the same melodies. You know, you're like that's too much. You know, and a lot of composers did that at this time, not just with the Mozart requiem, but you know, when there was can you know, hear the similarities between Mozart, Haydn, and Schubert in their masses? Like, absolutely. You know, and certain things carried forward, and if somebody wanted to change something, then they changed it. But they took forms very literally. But at the same time, there's a lot of pretty strong similarities that can't be overlooked. Um, yeah. Okay, should we keep moving? Because I don't want to keep us here all night, but I want you to hear a good amount of music. So here, next thing I wanted to show you is just a quick clip of a large work known as the Misa Criolla. Ariel Ramirez is an Argentinian composer, and the short version here is that he takes indigenous folk styles from Argentina, and including instruments and certain folk genres, and incorporates them into a setting of the Catholic Mass. And it's unique, and like it's this really interesting mix of Western styles and traditional Argentinian styles. As I said, it's a Catholic Mass, but it's interesting that it follows directly after Vatican II, which was 1964 or something like that. Vatican II is when the Catholic Church started to loosen up on on Latin not having to be the only language that's used in service, right? So this Mass is actually in Spanish. And that's significant, I think. And then the incorporation of all these folk instruments is also just really new and unique for that time. He wrote it in 64, yeah. So here's a clip of that. And I don't have a score. I don't have scores for the rest of these because none of them are in the public domain. And I can't get into the ensemble library right now. So here goes. Yeah. Pause it there. There's a whole thing kind of shifts from one thing into another. That performance was put together completely in Buenos Aires. That piece was performed all over the world in the 60s and 70s, and there was a group of musicians that would go around and perform it wherever it was being performed, and bring their styles to that area. But this is a modern reproduction of the piece with all Argentinian musicians, which is cool. All right. So, as I said, let's go in pairs, which I think is a good way of keeping things moving. This is, and I say that because this next one is kind of similar. So, it's similar, but it's fast forwarded by about 20 years. So that piece came out, the Ramirez came out in the 60s, right? And it was a big hit. As I said, people traveled the world performing that piece. But here's another piece which is originates in South America. It's called Tres Cantos Nativos de dos Indios Choral. And it's by Marcos Light, or it's an arrangement by Marcos Light, and it's a setting of 3 folk songs. These folk songs are from the native Curated tribe, and it's in northern central Brazil. And this is a tribe of about 3,000 people, 2,000 people currently, and they, and so this performance is given by the Young People's Chorus of New York City, and this chorus actually went on tour to Brazil and to northern Brazil and performed it there for members of the Curated tribe and learned aspects about their performance that they then brought to the performance that you're going to see. This performance was given at the European Festival of Youth Choirs in Basel, Switzerland. So this is, at least as far as they say, a very well-informed performance, because they literally traveled to Brazil to go learn from this tribe. So here goes. It's really, really interesting, incorporating some really modern compositional elements, including, as you'll see at the beginning, a depiction of rain and the sounds of the rainforest. So check it out. Hang on, sorry. Got a screen share here, almost forgot. Okay, it's the Youth Chorus, Young People's Chorus of New York City. Francisco Nunez is the conductor. Okay. So, two different takes on, incorporating indigenous styles into modern performance and into choral performances. Any takes on that? Any thoughts?
That was amazing.
They're awesome. Like young people's chorus of New York, they're pretty awesome. Almost have like a standing a standing agreement with ACDA that they can perform at an ACDA conference whenever they want. I think they just performed it in Rochester. Not with that conductor, but they did.
I like the way they like depicted like the rain by like letting everyone like take their own tempo and then all coming together like during the thunder and all that. That was cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's the way they coordinate it. Like the different effects kind of wash across the group. Yeah, very cool.
Was there someone actually doing that, like bird tweeting?
I think so.
That was cool.
Yeah.
But I agreed on that thunder, on that storm. It built so well, and it seems so real. I would have loved to hear it in person, because hearing it through here, like, it's that incredible. I can't imagine what it was like in person.
Yeah, having risers helps. Yeah, pretty cool.
Another thing that I really liked about that last one is, in both of them really, but especially like stood out in the last one, is like the change in like color, like vocal color. Like it just like it popped out. Like as soon as like they started singing, I was like, whoa, this is so different. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I think it's one of those things where it's like the choral world has this kind of like Eurocentric, like, okay, everything's like so proper and like vowels are perfect and tall and all that. And it's like, depending on like the language you're singing, that's not always like right. And like this was one of those pieces that like they sang it and they just went for like, okay, let's do this like authentically and just go for it. And everyone was on the same page, and it was just like so effective, and it was just so gorgeous.
Couldn't agree more. It's just very well said. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree on the Eurocentric idea of what a chorus sounds like, right? Fact is, people sing all over the world, and they don't sound like, oh, they don't always. It doesn't always sound like that. That's a great point. Okay, should we keep moving? I've got one piece. So the last two pieces are this one is kind of a neat combination of things. Number one, it's a recording of the Aeolians. Aeolians of Oakwood University, who are like among the most sought after choirs in the world right now, because they're just fantastic and amazing. But so Oakwood University, of course, is a historically black university in Huntsville, Alabama. And so, but then this is an arrangement of a jazz piece written by Leonard Brown, who's a saxophonist, also a person of color. And then it's arranged by Cedric Dent. Cedric Dent is what was a long time, like 25-year member of the vocal jazz group Take Six. And for those of you that don't know Take Six, go check out Take Six, because they are off the charts amazing. So I'll say, just as an aside, probably the most like a top 3 concert I've ever been to in my life was Take Six at the Blue Note Cafe in New York City. Like, blew my mind. Their recordings are incredible, and they sound even better in person. They're just unreal. And so this is somebody so Cedric Dent was a producer, an arranger, and a singer in Take Six. So you'll hear that influence. If you know Take Six, you'll hear that style in this piece. And then it's the Aeolians, who are this fantastic collegiate choir right now, kind of without peers at this point. So here goes. This is a shorter piece, and I might cut it short in the interest of time because I want to get to the Thompson. So here goes. You can smile when you can't say a word. You can smile when you cannot be heard. You can smile when it's cloudy or fair. You can smile anytime, anywhere.
Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile through your fear and sorrow. Smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Oh, light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still oh, when it's cloudy or smile anytime, you can smile anytime or anywhere. Smile.
That's awesome. I couldn't stop it because this is like, that's like it's basically a dry cut recording with no auto tune. I mean, it's just like that's just talent. They're incredible. if you're interested in the Aeolians, go check out their 2019 ACDA performance. They broke ACDA 2 years ago, and the incredible thing about them is that they can go from in that performance they sing Renaissance polyphony, a Bach motet with like instruments with orchestra, into this Ferrera, Italian composer's piece, and then into a slate of spirituals, and they just tore everything apart. It was incredible, and that whole performance is up on YouTube. So check that out if you're interested in them. Okay, last thing, and then we'll kind of talk about these last two. I'm hoping this last piece. I don't want to introduce it too much, but it does. I do want to set it up a little bit, and that is, well, first I will. Well, yeah. Let me share with you this. So there are program notes that the composer wrote himself. So Joel Thompson is in his late 20s or something. Very. Oops, sorry. I sent that to only Nadia. Great. I'm really good at chat. Here you go. So so Joel Thompson, young composer right now, and he's African American, and just he did a master's in choral conducting, and then was like incredibly moved by the recent happenings in and around racial justice, racial injustice, and it's just I think he said it was after the murder of Eric Garner that he had to do something with his emotions, and he wrote a piece of choral music, and so it's called "The Seven Last Words of the Unarmed," and if you have that link up there, this is how Thompson explains each movement. Each movement is based on what has been recorded as the last words of these seven people, these seven black men who were killed by police or people of authority. Kenneth Chamberlain, Trayvon Martin, Amadou Diallo, Michael Brown, Oscar Grant III, John Crawford, and Eric Garner. Right, and so each movement, there's seven movements, and each movement are their last words. Okay, it's written for orchestra and for men's chorus, and it was premiered by the University of Michigan Glee Club, and it's conducted by Eugene Rogers, who's on faculty there and directs the Glee Club, and. So I encourage you to watch the video because there's a lot that they do in their performance. You can see their performance here. I didn't show you the last one because that was it's just a recording, and there was nothing to see. But this you'll be able to see the video, but try to follow along with the program notes at the same time, so you kind of see and hear what the composer was going for as was happening. So listen carefully. Oh, and disclaimer: it is. Obviously, with the subject matter, it's hard to listen to and hard to experience. So, kind of prepare yourself for that. Okay, here goes. I'm gonna share screen.
All
So talk to me.
That piece was amazing,
Yeah.
and I think it was especially because it was a choir, but the singers were they seemed to really like portray the meaning of the composer intended,
Mm-hmm.
like in the way that they were like standing and like moving using their hands in the singing. It just really conveyed a lot.
They all bought in, that's for sure, and they were all in. It's it's compelling to see a performance like that for sure. What else?
I miss seeing stuff live.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. Yeah. I miss I miss performing too, I see a on stage like that experience, and I'm like, I do want to be there pretty badly. Just because it's you put on the concert clothes and whatever, for whatever reason, that's when like everybody just like hyper focuses, It's also weird not to applaud after.
It's so weird. That's I was gonna say that, but I was like, how do I say that? Like, this feeling of just. Should I email them individually and say good job?
Right. Anything else? What was your favorite movement? Or I don't know about favorite, but what was the movement that got you?
I would say the third movement, "Mama, I'm Going to College," probably tugged at the heartstrings the most by far.
I don't even know what to do with that. I don't know where to put that movement in my brain. It hurts so much. Ugh.
Yeah.
And the way he performed it, that soloist.
And it, like they were saying, the piano part is just so like calm, peaceful compared to the rest of the piece.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think having the program notes was also really helpful because in the notes it mentioned specifically like parts of the orchestra that were also like also had intentional meaning, and there are things that you may not necessarily like pick up on if you hadn't known that, like the recurring C on the piano and in the strings later on in the second half of the whole thing being like the heartbeat.
Yeah.
Like that, once I knew that was there, I just had chills every single time I heard it. I mean, I had chills through the whole thing, but like but those little details I would not have necessarily noticed, and like reading the program notes and like seeing like literally every single piece of the whole thing has a meaning, like portraying, like nothing is like unintentional. Every single thing is intentional, and I think that was one of the most like striking things about it. Is it's just like you just get so like captured in the whole thing because it's just like I was like glued to it, and like I had chills the entire time because like every single thing just like makes you think and like hits you. And if I were sitting there live in the audience, I probably would have been like either frozen or like bawling my eyes out the whole time.
Right.
Because
I wouldn't be able to hold it together.
No, because it's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, the he's like 28 or something. It's crazy. Yeah, pretty wild. You should go check out the whole website that they have because it's like sevenlastwords.org or something, and it's just devoted to this piece, and it includes like all kinds of materials. If like say if you're if you want to play this for, like a group of high schoolers, it gives you like a document, like with leading questions and like how and instructions on how to lead a discussion about race and about, what this piece is about and how to listen to it and just guiding things. It's pretty pretty remarkable that way. Just a way of bringing everybody into this piece and opening up the important conversations that we all need to have. A lot of cool resources on that website. Any other closing thoughts? I know it's a bit later than we expected tonight, but hopefully, I knew there was no way of going on to anything else after after that piece, because it's just so striking and pretty moving, and there's nothing that's going to follow that. But are there any thoughts about anything you heard tonight, or the combination of all of them that you think is worth mentioning? Because it's, as I said at the beginning, it's there's a whole repertoire of music that I'm still discovering, and I want to learn more about, and I think there's a lot to explore there, and we have the opportunity now. So hopefully these are some works that you never heard before, and maybe some styles that you never heard before, and hopefully that's valuable. All right. Any closing thoughts? Or are we going to sign off?
I just thank you for putting this together. It's very well rounded, and
thank you, Ethan. That's nice of you to say.
Yeah, you'll see me at the next one.
Yeah, right. There's 8 more. When's the next one? Next week. That is
Wednesday.
Chuck Gabriel and Garrett Michelson next Wednesday. They're doing our formative musical influences. So I'm very curious to see what that is. So it should be fun. All right. Thanks for everybody for hanging around, and have a good night, I suppose.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.